Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So let me make sure I'm up. I'm seeing green, and I always do one more volume check when I get live, because when bad things happens to my sound, it annoys me, and I think it annoys you guys also. Alright, we're good. Good, and good. So last night, Doug Jones, Democrat, unknown quantity Democrat, beat and exceeded the candidate in Alabama. Now this is pretty amazing because Alabama is deeply conservative, but ultimately he beat the guy by, I think it was less than 1 point. You can look at that a few ways. Whether Moore was guilty or not of pedophilia, because yes, he was accused of multiple counts of pedophilia over the course of 20-some years, or 40 years, something like that. But whatever, multiple counts of pedophilia, ultimately you've defined the guy as a pedophile. So you had a Democrat who beat a pedophile by under a point. But again, it is Alabama. To show you what he was running against, I want to show this part. Let's see, this.
Relations with another man, or a woman having sexual relations with another woman. What should having sexual relations with another man, or a woman having sexual relations with another woman, what should the punishment be?
It's just a sin, okay?
I understand what they tell you in church, or what they tell you in synagogue, or what they tell you in a mosque.
That's what my Bible tells me.
I'm not talking about
the Old Testament and the New Testament.
Well, I mean,
that's what this is about.
There are all sorts of
people want to take the whole 2,000 or 3,000 years of our history, and y'all just want to throw it out the window as if you're just going to make your own rules, your own man-made rules, and do whatever you want and sin. And that's part of the problem we've got in Washington, D.C. today, Jake. We got too many people winging it up there. They're fooling with women they shouldn't be fooling with. They ought to love their wives. Roy Moore loves his wife. Kayla loves him. It's clear on television. You can tell that. And that's the problem in this country. We need to get back to moral law.
What should, okay, you think we should get back to moral law. What should the punishment be for two men having sexual relations? What should the punishment be? I understand you think it's a sin. I don't know.
I'm not going to make that decision.
Judge Moore has also said that he doesn't think a Muslim member of Congress should be allowed to be in Congress. Why? Under what provision of the Constitution?
Because you have to swear on the Bible. When you are before, I had to do it. I'm an elected official, 3 terms. I had to swear on a Bible. You have to swear on a Bible to be an elected official in the United States of America. He alleges that a Muslim cannot do that ethically, swearing on the Bible.
You don't actually have to swear on a Christian Bible. You can swear on anything, really. I don't know if you knew that. You can swear on a Jewish Bible.
Oh, no, I swore on the Bible. I've done it 3 times.
I'm sure you have. I'm sure you've picked a Bible, but the law is not that you have to swear on a Christian Bible. That is not the law. You don't know that? All right, Ted Crockett with
I don't know. I know that Donald Trump did it when we made him president.
Because he's Christian and he picked it. That's what he wanted to. That's what he wanted to swear in on. Ted Crockett with the Moore campaign. Good luck tonight. Thank you so much for being here.
That was a spokesman for the Moore campaign. That was the quantity that was running in Alabama. Doug Jones beat that guy by less than a point. Not him. I'm just saying the person that he's representing. He beat the guy by less than a point. It was around a point. I don't know the exact score, but so yes, Democrats are celebrating because it is Alabama. But I just want to get across that man is terrifying, and I am on this camp of let Democrats fail in their own right if you don't necessarily know the quantity who you're voting for. Doug Jones. Nobody knows who Doug Jones is for the most part. They know maybe 1 or 2 things that Doug Jones have done, but for the most part, he's an empty quantity. Those people were terrified of that guy. They were terrified of the guy that spokesman was representing. That's not a victory, man. I'm sorry, that's not a victory. That's terrifying. Like the fact that guy is up there as a choice in elected office, for the most part a theocrat. He would be a Christian ISIS. Okay, I'm back. Yeah, that's a terrifying prospect. So I just want you to know the quantity that you're dealing with, what those people were going and rallying for. People were also saying that this was some kind of victory in the sense of blacks coming out to the polls to vote for Doug Jones. Again, I think blacks voted over 90%. I think women went like 95% for the guy. Blacks vote for Democrats because they're terrified of Republicans. This has nothing to do with love for Doug Jones. I would imagine they don't even know who Doug Jones is. They were terrified of the quantity that you were seeing in that video. Terrified of that quantity. Part of the thing that they're also saying is always immensely annoying to me, where they're talking about voter suppression. And they would say blacks overcame voter suppression. Why do blacks have to overcome voter suppression? You're voting for this guy by 90% and you don't have one of the major parties in the United States doing anything to try to head off this idea that they're kicking and kneecapping your base. That base that they want to come out there and vote. They're making their lives more difficult, and the Democratic Party just allows that shit to take place all across the United States. That is immensely aggravating to me. Look, there was an interview with Nina Turner and Paul J. You've always heard me say I love me some Nina Turner, and that has not changed. I still love me some Nina Turner. I love the Real News Network. I am even holding on to the Real News Network pen, but this was a horrible interview. This is a horrible interview. I've seen two interviews between Nina Turner and Paul J. It's radically safe. You have a Democrat sitting in front of you, and I understand that Democrat is Nina Turner. I understand that Democrat works with you in the capacity of your show, Real News Network, but she is also head of Our Revolution. And these guys have been vocally and screaming that they're taking back the ship. They have been calling it Our Revolution with the root word, revolt. At the end of the day, however, she is a Democrat. Look, I guess my point is, and I'm not fully lumping Nina Turner in on this, I'm just kind of making this point as the overall party. The party cheated. One of the candidates lied about the cheating for over a year. The moment they get caught about the cheating, they scream Russia at the top of their lungs, yell at Sanders, because Sanders had the temerity to even run against Hillary Clinton, let alone Sanders turned around and supported Hillary Clinton afterwards, regardless. But these guys have either been lying, screaming that they're united, even though they needed to form a unity commission, and then at the moment where somebody comes out on the inside, mind you, the information was already out that they were lying, they continued to lie. They didn't necessarily stop them from lying. They continued to lie in the face of reality, saying that we're united, no, we didn't cheat your candidate, yes, we're impartial, and then when Donald Brazile comes out, they say we need to move forward. So that's the quantity we're dealing with. We're talking about the other quantity that's also, for the last 20, 30, 40 years, have lied through their teeth, put a knife in the back of labor with NAFTA. Obama was going to turn the knife with the TPP while at the same time pretending as if he was some kind of support for labor. Unions have been decimated all throughout the country. I am making this point that you should be radically cynical when you're talking to anybody from that party. I don't understand why you take this casual approach when you're having this conversation with Nina Turner, particularly if she's making this DEM-ENTER argument of pulling people into the party. I am saying this because I am slightly annoyed by this interview. Like, there are certain questions that need to be asked. The tenor and even the way Paul J. was framing his questions looks like it would lead to a particular question, or it looks like certain questions would naturally arise, and those questions in no way arose in this interview. They should be asked. I'm going to show part of this interview. Yeah, I'm going to show part of this interview. I'm not going to show the whole thing, but there are parts that I definitely want to talk about. So let's take a look. I've tweeted this to Nina Turner and Paul J. Neither one of them are going to see this video. Neither one of them are going to respond. Nina Turner is more than welcome to come onto the show anytime she wants to have a conversation. But Paul J., up your game, dude. Up your game. And I understand that it's friendly territory and everything else, but this woman is head of an organization that ultimately cheated one of the other candidates, has lied remorselessly and in no way owned up to the lying itself. And if you're telling me that I'm boarding the ship, we're going to board the ship and we're going to take back and we're going to revolt and all this other stuff, looks like your position here should be radically cynical. Radically cynical. Let's take a look. Miss Turner. And again, love Nina Turner to death. Love her to death. And she's a politician. So whether I love her to death or not, she will be treated as any other politician. Let's keep going. So let's see.
If there's any lesson to be learned here, it is do not leave any state or any Democrat or progressive or Democratic leaning folks behind in any state just because we don't believe we can win that state electorally. And then I believe that Charles Barkley framed it best, especially when it comes to the African-American community, which I have been saying this for years, that the Democratic Party needs to stop taking the African-American vote for granted. I mean, Paul J., they had to knock and drag the African-American community out. You know, this whole race hinged upon them. And as we saw, the stats that have come out so far this morning is that 97% of African-American women voted for Mr. Jones and 92% of African-American men voted for Mr. Jones. While on the other side, about 65% of white women voted for Mr. Moore, and a little higher percentage, still somewhere in the 60s, of white men voted for Mr. Moore. So this race undoubtedly was won because of the African-American community's loyalty to the Democratic Party, and also, as you said, the Senator Shelby from Alabama encouraging people to write in another candidate. That's
Nothing to applaud, by the way. That's sad. That's profoundly sad. That is immensely sad. 90-something%. Do you know that they were having cops standing out in the polling locations to put pressure on the people who are coming in some cases maybe even checking for warrants to see who they can lock up as those people go into the polls in order to try to intimidate people going to the polls? They were doing all sorts of dirty tricks in Alabama. The other one was having to do with the driver's licenses. If you're voting at a percentage of 90-something%, and you don't have a party to represent your interests, even as something as trivial as protecting your capacity to vote without being harassed, yes, you're being taken for granted. What I disagree with Nina Turner on is that it's not shame on the Democratic Party for taking blacks for granted. Shame on blacks for allowing the Democratic Party to take them for granted. I mean, shit, man. 90%? Are you shitting me? I understand that you're terrified of the other guy. I get it. I totally get it. I showed that picture and I was terrified myself. I didn't even live in Alabama and I was terrified of that guy. But you understand that look, I've made the statement before. It's either dollars or pitchforks. If you have a quantity, meaning they're competing interests, that's what I'm trying to get at. They're competing interests. In any particular candidate, he has competing interests. He looks at this thing as how much money do I need to raise, and yes, I also need to at least toe a particular line verbally in order to convince people, a lot of those people, to get them to vote for me. It is pitchforks or dollars. If you're voting at a level of 90%, your vote is a canned quantity. They don't care about your vote. They're not crazy for doing that. They look at it as these people are giving me dollars and these other people are not around and these people are going to vote for me regardless. This is the same argument against unions, same argument against labor, same arguments against everyone else. Same argument. You're blackmailed into that vote to some degree. But if they have you over a barrel in this way where you are complicit and you're always going to vote for this particular thing where you're a known quantity, they're not crazy for taking the money in that case. Yes, I want to take the money and do the favors because at the very least I know these people are always going to come out to the polls. It's like, yeah, you're taken for granted. You're allowed because you're taken for granted because you allow yourself to be taken for granted. And I understand the history with the Democratic Party and African Americans. I understand that from our standpoint there is only one party. All that's true. I understand it. I get it. The other guys are maniacs. The other guys, at least from our perspective, are some racist because we don't necessarily understand why they vote Republican in this way. Yes, all that stuff is true. So fair enough. And look, when I'm saying I don't necessarily believe that everybody who voted for Republicans are racist. I don't believe that. But there's, within our community, there is this feeling of why do those people vote in that particular way? Certainly, they understand that those people are going after their self-interest. Now, part of this annoys me for a second reason, though. Democrats hug identity in this way purely in order to obfuscate from having this conversation about economics. the reason they focus on identity to this degree, meaning, yes, they're going to hug your identity, but they're giving these, they lose nothing from a corporate standpoint and being multicultural. Nothing at all. They can hug your identity to no end. The thing that actually really helps you, ultimately, however, is economics. And these guys, for the most part, hug identity. They hug any darkie that they can find, because at the very least, that keeps them from having this conversation about your wallet. The conversation that you want to have is about your wallet. Protecting who you are, meaning standing up for a person's identity, in no way stops them from having a conversation about economics. They choose to have one conversation in order to downplay the other conversation. You're being had. That's my point. That's my point. Yes, they take advantage of you because you allow yourself to be taken advantage of. That's what I'm getting at. Let's keep going. It's this specific point that annoys me about it. You give so much away. You give so much away. And I understand that the other people are maniacs. I get it. But there are other parties. There are other parties. At the very least, your vote shouldn't necessarily be complicit because you're terrified of the guy who's across the aisle. If you do that, if you're terrified, if you're so terrified of the other guy who's across the aisle, you're still putting somebody in that office. Those people went to the polls, I would wager, to vote against Moore, not necessarily to vote for Doug Jones. And I would wager that most of those people don't even know the quantity that they voted in that office. So let's keep going. And mind you, this is me saying this, even knowing that the other guy was a maniac. It's not that I wanted the other guy in the office. I'm just trying to make this kind of larger contextual point of this level of voting is not necessarily to the advantage of the whole. You can never necessarily exert a force because you can never necessarily pull your vote away from that particular party. The party always knows that at the very least, they're going to have this loyal dog of a base that regardless of what we do, they're going to continuously vote for us. I'm saying that needs to change. That needs to fundamentally change. Otherwise, the status quo is going to be the thing that you consistently get. Let's keep going.
Yeah, certainly if there had been a normal Republican vote and a normal Republican candidate, say that in many cities across the country where there is the worst African-American poverty, in power is the Democratic Party, for example, Baltimore and Chicago and other such places.
That's right.
And that's part of what the fight within the party is about. So let's talk a bit now about the Unity Reform Commission. As I said, I think.
By the way, I want to make one point. Just as bare bones, I should have made this in the beginning. The election of Doug Jones, it balances it. It's like Democrats are just 1 or 2 seats down in the Senate now. They gain 1 seat in the Senate. Your leverage, meaning, actually, let him talk about it first. We can talk about it after. Let me make this point.
I think it's more a commission to establish the rules for essentially what is a civil war going on inside the Democratic Party between the, as people call, the corporate ring and the Sanders wing, or the corporatist wing and the progressive wing. And you're one of the prominent leaders of the progressive wing. You were on that commission. What did you make of the results? One of the big issues, obviously, being superdelegates.
Yeah, I mean, overwhelmingly, the results were good. This is just the first phase of a longer process here, in that there were 21 members on the Unity Reform Commission, just so our viewers are just refreshing their memory about this, that this was an agreement between Senator Sanders and Secretary Clinton coming out of the 2016 primary, that there was definitely a need for reform in the Democratic Party, especially when it comes to dealing with the presidential election process. 21 of us, 8 of the 21 were appointed by Senator Sanders, affectionately known as the Bernie 8. One of the things that was written in the resolution beforehand, so we dealt with 4 major areas. It was caucuses, primaries, superdelegates, and transforming the party, and not necessarily in that order. Now, the superdelegate, though, portion of the resolution was already pre-negotiated, meaning that it was written prescriptively in that resolution that at least 60% of the superdelegates would be done away with. That leaves about 280 superdelegates who are unpledged, meaning they can vote any way that they want. And those delegates are the honorable party leaders, the elected folks. So, think your governor, think your U.S. senator, think your Congress people. They make up the 280 superdelegates who still remain unpledged. The other portion of the superdelegates are bound on the first vote, the first round of voting during the presidential primary process. They are bound to the outcome of their state.
You favored no superdelegates at all, and it wasn't just well-known progressives. Even Tim Kaine, who was Hillary Clinton's vice presidential nominee, was actually advocated eliminating superdelegates. But most of that commission were members that had been appointed by Tom Perez, who essentially represents the Clinton wing, or directly the Clinton wing. And there are still superdelegates. And there were other issues as well. For example, the role of paid consultants and the kind of money that gets sloshed around there. What did you think of the results of those kinds of issues?
Yeah, and we did deal with that. I do want to say, yes, the overwhelming majority of the people on the Union Reform Commission were appointed either by Secretary Clinton or Chairman Perez. And so, again, that gave, the 8. I mean, all you got to do, 13 and 8. The headline is 13 and 8. So we came in at a numerical disadvantage. However, there was consensus. There was compromise. And I wish that the public at large had gotten a chance to see some of the tension that was going on behind the scenes, because we all came in totally on the opposite side and were able, for many of these proposals, to come to some consensus or compromise. Compromise means that neither side gets all that they want. On the superdelegate side, I too would have liked there to be no superdelegates whatsoever. But again, out of all of the areas that we worked on, that one was very much prescribed. So in terms of writing in, rules or making recommendations that consultants can't both consult for a presidential campaign and also consult for the DNC, that money cannot be spent within the DNC process, as we know, as was revealed by a former interim chairwoman, Donna Brazile, in her new book, Hacks, that folks who did not have control of the DNC were able to dictate how money was spent. They were, in fact, spending money without the authorization of any officer that had the fiduciary responsibility for the party. The Unity Reform Commission has recommended that not ever happen again, and so I'm hoping that will stick. Another thing that we recommended was an ombudsman committee that will be elected from the body of the DNC, and that committee would be charged with taking on any complaints or concerns that a presidential candidate had during the primary process. So, all of those things are really good towards bringing the party closer to transparency. But all of this is contingent, Paul J., on making sure that the Rules and Bylaws Committee, they are the next committee in the process that will take up the recommendations from the Unity Reform Commission. They have up to 6 months to take up these recommendations.
And
right there. That's what I want to talk about. So they have up to 6 months to get those in. I would make the point that in 2018, or if it gets close to 2018, the closer you get to 2018, the weaker your hand gets. Meaning, as she acknowledged, that has to go to the Rules Committee. The Rules Committee has, for the most part, been purged of Bernie voters. The next thing that she's going to say is, yes, they've gotten rid of Sanders supporters because Tom Perez purged Bernie supporters from that particular body. The later this gets, meaning the further this gets put off, the weaker your hand gets, particularly if Democrats are going to do okay in 2018. Your leverage, the reason why Sanders had leverage, such leverage in the beginning, was because they understood that those people were willing to walk. 18 million people leaving the party, 18 million people walking. You're leveraging this. The strength of your hand goes with this idea of legitimacy. Legitimacy. Let me say it this way. In the same way that countries get their power from the governed, meaning all of the people in the United States, for the most part, we cede a certain amount of our rights. These rights that we cede away is this idea of creating a governmental body, this this war between individuality versus this kind of common good. The weight of the government, however, is supposed to get its power from the consent of the governed. Same thing with parties. Parties are this kind of organ of the governmental body. In this case, the legitimacy of the party is based on whether or not that party can get itself elected. It's almost like its existence in of itself is a thing that that gives it legitimacy. They've lost 1,100 seats all throughout the United States, including on the federal level at this point. House, Senate, Supreme Court, and the presidency. They lost the presidency to Maniac. The issue, the reason why you guys are having a commission and everything else right now is because of their losing. It's because of their losing. They lost a fair amount of legitimacy with this idea that they couldn't win a goddamn election, particularly this somebody as easy as Donald fucking Trump. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. But my point, the point that I'm trying to make, however, is this Unity Commission, the strength of the commission, is this other threat behind the scenes of this kind of people leaving the party, this Dem exit. If the Democratic Party realizes, if they realize that in 2018, if a situation comes up where they're like, hey, we think we can win back the Senate, or we think we can win back the House. If they believe that they can win back the House, your Unity Commission is going to get voted down. Whether it exceeds the Rules Commission or not, it is going to get voted down. There's going to be no reason. There's no tension. There's nothing to push you past in this way. If the Democrats would have lost Virginia, the tension and the pressure would have been ratcheted up that much more with this idea of, oh my God, we're failing miserably even in the age of Donald Trump. Virginia may have been, you know, getting rid of these rabid Republicans from Virginia, but ultimately from a national standpoint, it has weakened your hand. Now you're in another situation where this guy won in Alabama. It is consistently weakening your hand. If this thing is put off for 6 months, and then it's voted on later on, but at the point at which it's voted on, they've already established at the majority of the polls that they are projected to win. Remember what happened to Simpson Bowles, the Simpson Bowles Commission? I asked my wife, I said, hey, do you remember the Simpson Bowles Commission? She was like, no. I said, exactly. Under the rug. Under the rug. You're on a clock against time to some degree. If they're right, and Donald Trump scares the shit out of everybody in this way, that these people are willing to just run back to whoever is standing on the other side, unless you've organized in a way where you can take advantage of those people running back. If what's standing there is some random status quo radical centrist, then you've lost. Then you've lost. You've proven to them that ultimately this Unity Commission and everything else is a pointless endeavor. They can scare people back to the Democratic Party, essentially leveraging their fear in order to get into that office again. Your leverage at that point goes down. Your leverage at that point goes down. I guess what I'm asking is, you guys need to call for a vote early, not later. And it needs to be a condition. Also, yeah, it's a gamble. And that's the other point. Good. I couldn't figure out where I was going with this. Part of the issue here has to do with trust. So, Paul J., as he's asking this interview, the very next question, or one of the questions that should have been asked in this interview, seems like it screams to be asked, is, hey, you know, there's a lot of lefties who are extraordinarily pissed with the Democratic Party. How do you regain trust with that group? How do you regain trust with that group? You've had 18 million people walk out on that party. Part of the reason that you're having the Unity Commission right now is because they understood that all of those people walked. How do you regain trust with that party? You have lied for over the course of a year. You failed miserably in regards to living up to even the modest progressive causes. I mean, including just being completely apathetic towards labor, the poor, all these other things, all these other parts of society that you yourself have a philosophical responsibility to deal with. You're not supposed to be a massive big tent. You're supposed to be specific to the 99%, and you failed miserably in that obligation. So in addition to the failing, in addition to the lying, in addition to the cheating, in addition to the corruption, how do you build trust when this is the record that your party has laid out bare for everybody to see. My point is, Paul Jay should have been dealing with this interview from a standpoint of radical cynicism. Why should anybody trust you? How do you get across this thing of trust when everything, particularly up for the past 2 years, have gone absolutely contrary in the opposite direction of that trust? I would say part of that is being willing, meaning you. I mean, this goes both ways. There's this aspect of you being the conduit between the Democratic Party trying to sheepdog people back into the party. But there's also this aspect of the party itself. There's a few things. I would say, yes, radical transparency, but beyond radical transparency, being willing to put down conditions, saying, and I guess the question that I wish Paul Jay would have asked is, if they say no, that's screaming to be asked. It's like if in 2018 they get to the point where they said, we've slow-footed this process all the way out to as far as we can get it, and it looks like we're going to take the House. And they shoot down your proposals. They just say no. They said no to everything. We're not changing the superdelegates. We're not changing the primaries. We're not changing squat. No. No. What do you do? That seems like it's screaming to be asked. If there's no situation where you're willing to walk, where any and everything that takes place, they can cheat your guy, they can behave any way they want to, they can slow foot the process and then turn around and turn you down. And if after all that, you guys are still saying, we're going to board the ship, we're going to keep trying, we're going to do this, then it doesn't really matter what takes place. You guys are just Democratic functionaries. You have these pipe dreams of wanting to change things, but ultimately, regardless of what the party does, you're still there, picking up for the party, sheepdogging people into that party. The question that needs to be asked is, do you have any conditions? What is the level? What's the extent? What's the point where you grow the spine? What is the turn of the worm? That's what I want to know. What is the condition? What is the thing where you say, okay, I've had enough. I'm done. I want something that actually represents unions and workers and the poor, and that can represent those things full-throatedly and unabashed. When do you get to that point? That's what I want to know. That's what I want to know. And that's the question that they never ask. That's the question that's always danced about. That seems to be the most pertinent question to all of these people. Because if all of these people have no standards where they can just be stepped on in perpetuity, I think that's something that needs to be said. If you're saying we're trying to get people into the party, we're going to DEM-ENTER, we're going to DEM-ENTER, we're going to DEM-ENTER, we're DEM-ENTER forever, then you're just a Democrat. You're not trying to change anything. Yes, that's not fair. Yes, you may be trying to change something, but it doesn't necessarily matter if the party changes. Ultimately, you're still going to be there trying to get into a burning bus. If you're going to build trust, I would say a beginning point or a starting point. I understand the Unity Reform Commission and everything else, but I would say a starting point from the perspective of, I guess, the Bernie-crats, the people who are trying to sheepdog in this way. I guess the very basic way of building trust would be to say, look, the DEM-Exiters, if they don't accept these things, if they don't accept these modest, tepid provisions that we've been able to get through the Unity Reform Commission, then fair enough, we'll walk. That's how you build trust. At the very least, the people on the exit side knows that you're working in tandem with them and you're not necessarily on your own thing. I would wager, I guarantee you this, that the people who are in the Dem-Exit camp look at you and think, well, those guys are just Democrats. Those guys are just going to say whatever they have to say. They're just going to sheepdog. They're just going to sheepdog and say whatever they have to say. I love me some Nina Turner, but I don't know Nina Turner's conditions on this. Like, I don't know if Nina Turner has conditions. I don't know if there's any point where Nina Turner says, I had enough. That's what I want to know. Personally, I think that builds trust. I think that builds trust. Because if that situation takes place, then at the very least, if you stay true to your word, they would look at it and say, okay, they did what they said they were going to do. They're not just sheepdogging. They were willing to actually start something new when they were shot down by the Democratic Party. Now, from the Democratic Party side, I don't understand why anybody would trust the Democratic Party, if I'm being honest. I don't understand what track record they would use to even justify this idea of trust in this case. So if that's true, which fucking is absolutely true, then they should accept each and every one of these tepid provisions if they're looking to try to bridge the gap. I mean, and they should do it before 2018. Because one or two things is going to take place. If I am right, and 2018 looks like it's going to go well for Democrats, they're going to take this lesson as, we don't have to change. The radical center, the center holds. We don't have to change squat. We can keep this business going in perpetuity. Status quo forever. That's the lesson they're going to take. That was the lesson they took from Virginia. That's the lesson they took from Alabama. I guarantee you, if 2018 goes well, that is the lesson they're going to take. And any tension, any chance, anything that you thought you were going to get accomplished in that Unity Commission will go by the wayside. There will be no impetus at all to change. This is not about integrity. Like, this is not about people doing the right thing or doing good things. You're begging this party to change. And I'm saying, you're a brick in this. Because they're not going to change just because they think you have a nice smile. Your brick in this is the fact that all of those people left. And that brick evaporates if all those people go back because they're terrified of Trump. Your conditions are important. Your conditions build trust, because your conditions, at the very least, let other people who are, for the most part, they accept you as being misguided, but with your heart being in the right place. At the very least, they would know that you're being earnest when you're saying, look, we have standards, we do have a spine, we do have a backbone, we do have a sense of pride in ourselves. There's only so many slaps in the face that we're going to take before we walk. And at the very least, people will know what that level is. I don't understand why Paul J didn't ask that question. I don't understand why Paul J didn't kind of, it seems as natural can be. As natural as natural can be. Yes, this was a tepid, interview. There's certain things, like, it seems I would want him to be slightly more adversarial. Look, it's Nina Turner. I love Nina Turner. So no, I don't want him trying to bully her about. But on that, I think that is a massive question. All of these DEM-ENTERs, whether you're talking about TYT, whether you're talking about Demoki Kantz, whether you're talking about Nina Turner, whether you're talking about Bernie Sanders, where are your standards? That's what I want to know. That's what I want to know. The other flowery questions and everything else, yes, that's nice. What are your standards? What's your bottom line? At what point do you say, I'm done? At what point do you say, I'm done? So I leave that question out there, knowing that nobody is, for the most part, going to answer that question. But I am immensely curious. I am immensely curious. Absolutely. Holy shit, we have 96 people here. Let's see. Unity Commission equals few super delegates. Pinch me, I must be dreaming. And that's the other thing. They need you in this way. Like, I guess I'm trying to get this thing across of, if there's these two strands of thought, either DEM-ENTER and DEM-EXIT. I think both people have their heart in the right place. This is the idea of the reformer versus the revolutionary. Understand the merge or the back and forth. The reason why I say build trust is because you're trying to get people to trust in something that they have no reason to trust in at all. I think it's perfectly sane to not trust somebody who's lied and cheated you. I'm just saying. You should join the DEM-EXITers. If your plans fail, if you guys are in this DEM-ENTER thing and they slap you in the face, if you don't get the tepid changes that you guys are putting forth in order to get done, if they slap you down, you should leave. You should walk. You should walk. That's my point. That's the point I'm getting at. And there's no way DEM-EXIT can look at you with any level of legitimacy in this way, and certainly should not be sheepdog if you can't necessarily define your boundaries. You can't define your boundaries. Why would anybody be sheepdog back into the party? At that point, you guys are just Democratic functionaries. Like I said, I love me some Nina Turner, but ultimately Nina Turner is a Democrat. And so, you know, this idea of we can change it, we can reform it, this stuff has been going on for 50, 60 years. This idea of trying to change what the Democratic Party is. I get it, man. I guess I'm just trying to make this point that your leverage goes down the longer this goes on. That's all I'm saying. And if you can't necessarily define your boundaries, and if they start getting to the point where they're like, holy shit, we can win, then yeah, your leverage goes away. Nothing changes. Status quo forever. You've been shot in the face when you were boarding the ship. You need to be willing to walk. You need to be willing to walk. Otherwise, all of this is for naught. So, I would love for Nina Turner to answer that question. And Paul J is just dropped the fucking ball. And I like Paul J, but man, how can you not ask that question? I mean, that just, and maybe I'm biased on this. It just seems the most natural thing in the world. He's making this argument that there's a war brewing in the Democratic Party. Agree with him perfectly. I've said it many times. 2020 would be a war. Fair enough. And I also agree. They're setting the boundaries for that particular war. This is not a unity commission at all. It's what size knives are going to be, you know, what shivs are going to be allowed in this conflict. It's that type of stuff. And one side trying to nail down the rule set. Understood. Fair enough. But you understand, that rule set is not nailed down by your Unity Reform Commission. And in the same way, Simpson Bowles was done purely just to shut up certain people in the government. That stuff wasn't implemented. That stuff had no intention of being implemented. That stuff was there just purely for show. It's purely for show. So I'm not necessarily saying the Unity Reform Commission is there for show. I'm just saying that your threat in this is the fact that these people were willing to walk. The idea that you would give that threat up. And it's not a threat if you're never willing to walk, by the way. It's not a threat if you're never willing to pull the trigger on that. If it's always, oh, these people will be here regardless. African Americans were voting by 90-something% for a party that has done shit for African Americans. Yes, I understand that the civil rights movement and everything else. Yeah, fair enough. I'm talking about the last 30, 40, 50, 60 years. That vote has been taken for granted because they've allowed that vote to be taken for granted. And the idea you're voting 90% for that party is terrifying. That's terrifying. And I understand you were terrified of the backwater, the guy who didn't know that you can swear on anything. And yeah, the guy's terrifying. Yeah, the guy's terrifying. You regain trust by telling them to fall in line. Of course, Zach Simpson, that's exactly how you gain trust, apparently. D. Martin, include JT. They don't care about trust. I don't think they do. That's my point. That's my point, Martin. They don't. It has nothing to do with trust. Has nothing to do with integrity. It has to do with differential advantage. If this goes on for a period of time and we believe that we can sheepdog people back into the party and have to give nothing for it, this is what the course that we're going to take. Why would they do anything else? Like, yeah, integrity doesn't apply. Integrity doesn't apply. Jeremy Popolaski. 60% less superdelegates, 100% same manipulation. Yeah, somebody said, hey, 60% less cheating is still 100% cheating. I don't think you guys realize being willing to walk is a big fucking deal. I'm just saying it's a big fucking deal. The entire reason that you guys even have a unity commission is based around this idea of being willing to walk. And if ultimately you're not willing to walk, and if ultimately those people are going to get elected again, your strength, your leverage is this tension that's created by their failures. If they believe that those failures can be undone based upon people being terrified of Trump, then guess what? It's going to be Trump in Russia. Then it's going to be, Trump and Nazis. Then they went back to Trump in Russia when the Trump and Nazis wasn't going. And now it's Trump as a predator because we kicked out, we got rid of Franken and the other guy, Conyers. So now we can say Donald Trump is a woman's predator or something. All of these things are done. I think the aggravating thing is people fall into this stuff. All of these things are done purely to obfuscate from race. From economics. Their millionaires told them to shut the hell up about economics, and they shut the hell up about economics and to start talking about women and Trump. The Republicans are putting forth a fucking tax bill that's going to put $1.5 trillion of debt on the backs of the American public. 60% of the money that they're giving in that tax cut is going to the top 1%. Democrats don't make the argument about economics. They don't make the argument about class, seeming the most natural argument to make in the world. Trump in Russia, or Trump is a sexual predator. And again, this is one of those questions that Paul J. should have asked. If Democrats, in no way, can even come out and say that they were guilty, And in this situation, one of their billionaires told them to shut up about talking about class, and they immediately shut up about class and went towards these things of Trump as a predator. Why should anybody trust that that party is going to represent the interests of the 99% when their donors clearly have such influence and sway over even their current policy and talking points? The question seems as natural as can be. Seems as natural as can be. Yeah, Paul J. dropped the ball. Paul J. dropped the ball. Chris NZ, the party of nope and same, pretty much. Zox Ox. That's the day they go through most. Let me see. That's the day they go through what most of you followers have gone through, and they can enjoy it and savor its bitterness. Savor its bitterness. I love that. Savoring bitterness. The bitter enders. Captain Obvious. Well, it's technically not even 56% less rigging. It's 56% recommended less rigging. Thank you, Captain Obvious, being precise. The actual rigging will likely stay solid 100%. 100%. I love this. It's like, let's have a revolution. I beseech thee, sir. Hey, can you please allow us to do this? I love that. A step and fetch it revolution. I love it. I love it. The only revolution where people are begging for less rigging. Hey, please, can you rig it less? We need you to rig it less. This is our petition that you rig it less. Amazing. It's fucking amazing. We're gonna board the ship. We're gonna board the ship. Captain Obvious. James Wilkerson, I do not accept. Can't trust anyone with a D next to their name. Zach Simpson, this is my point. This is my point. When what's his name? Sam Ronan. Do you understand why? The reason why Sam Ronan jumped to Republican? Part of it, yes. Part of it is this whole thing of this kind of cultural thing where people vote Republican just to vote Republican. But part of it is also lefties weren't going to vote for anyone with a D beside their name. He required the progressive vote, and the fact that he had a D beside his name meant that those people were not going to get their votes. When I'm making this point about trust, if Miss Turner even saw this video, I suspect she's not going to get it to this point. But if she does get to this point, part of my point about building trust is because, yes, people don't trust you. And I'm not necessarily you individually. I'm talking about the party as a whole, but you're a part of that edifice. If you're part of that edifice, you're tarred with it. There would be a lot of people who would vote for you because you're Nina Turner, but I guarantee you there will also be a lot of people who wouldn't because you had a D beside your name. How do you build trust with people who, for the most part, have no reason to trust anything that you're saying based on your own track record? And again, I'm not saying you, I'm talking about the party. But from your standpoint, people need to understand that you're not just this kind of democratic functionary that's serving as a sheepdog apparatus. They need to understand that ultimately, at some point, there is a Ike and Tina moment where Tina's in the car and, you know, that type of stuff. There needs to be that moment. Where is that moment? And if you can't articulate that that moment exists, meaning there is some point where you've had enough, where a line is crossed, where this party no longer represents your interests. It hasn't been representing your interests for the last 50, 60 years. But whatever. The scales fall from your eyes and you're in the light of the sun and you're like, oh, I was wrong. I was wrong. You know. If you can articulate that point, at the very least, people will believe, okay, she said she wasn't going to do this. She said she wasn't going to support. And I don't just mean you. I mean the entire slate of dementors. The entire slate. Declare your intentions. Declare where you stand. At the very least, try to give some idea of what is your breaking point. So when you hit that breaking point, people could at the very least acknowledge, okay, that person was full of shit. They hit that breaking point and went clear past it. Or they hit that breaking point, they were honest. They said, I'm done. I can't deal with this anymore. This party no longer represents my interests. You meld those two sides by establishing those ground rules. I would say the most tepid of ground rules, if you're talking about a negotiation, is trying to get any people who are part of the bitter enders to accept the 60% less rigging. If the bitter enders say that, okay, we don't like the 60% less rigging, but at the very least they're opening primaries, you can at least meld that. But again, you meld that purely from the standpoint of declaring your intentions. not I am DEM-ENTER forever, which means you're just a Democrat. There is a difference in those things. There is a different, massive difference in those things. D. Martin, so you're disavowing Bernie Sanders, Jamal? Say what? I am not disavowing Bernie Sanders. If Bernie Sanders runs, Bernie Sanders is getting my vote. I'm having a very specific conversation about what's taking place in this interview between Nina Turner and Paul Jay. And yes, if I was having a conversation with Sanders, I would ask if Bernie Sanders is the exact same thing. Yes, I would want to know. I want to know. I want to know, is there a point where Sanders said, okay, nothing's going to take place in this party? That's what I want to know. Otherwise, again, you're just, it's like, if you're forever willing to get slapped, then how are you leading anybody? The only thing you would ever lead anybody to is continuously getting slapped. People need to know where you stand. That's all I'm saying. That's all. That's all I'm saying. James Wilkerson, Unity was based on Rick and Morty. That's awesome. That's funny. None of your business. I missed it. Who's the pop character? Professor X. Who's the what? The pop character? Oh, that's not Professor X. That's fucked up. That's Paul J. Paul J. That's wrong. That's so wrong. That's so wrong. No, Paul J's host of Real News Network. He's a fucking awesome journalist. I love the guy. I like him. Not in this interview, but under normal circumstances, yes, I like him. This was, like I said, radically safe. Radically safe. Luca Clemente, get to the point, Jamal. Why do we meet with the pitchforks? Why do we meet with the pitchforks? I don't know, Luca. I think we meet at same progressive spot. She had a few of them that we can borrow if we can't bring our own. Catherine Horace, there's nothing Trump can do to scare me into voting for Schumer or Gillibrand ever again. Agreed. Agreed. That's my point. Look, I am not necessarily saying completely pull yourself out the political process. You've never heard me say that. What I have said is, if somebody doesn't represent your interest, they should not get your vote. You shouldn't necessarily say, I'm going to reward this other guy because this other guy is not necessarily representing me. And stand firm by that point. Even if that means voting third party, even if that means writing somebody in, they should not get your vote if they don't represent your interests. And your weight, part of your weight goes away when they know that for the most part they can get you to vote. Just, you know, in this kind of perfunctory way, just because you're terrified of the other guy. So, yeah. Yeah. DNC Bernie seems to work against third-party progressive options. Yeah, he is. Yeah, Nicholas Lockmeyer, he is. He is. He absolutely is. And I think I've done a video, this was like months and months and months ago, making this point that Sanders, in this case, is somewhat of a problem if you're trying to start a third party. They need to have the scales fall from their eyes. I don't want to be parsed up in this way. I suspect Turner, Jay, I suspect many of these guys, the policies that all of us for the most part would support, I would guarantee these guys will most likely support it. Yes, I would probably be further to the left in what they would go. But nevertheless, the changes that you're talking about making, these guys will probably be on your side on those changes. The problem is the energies are diverted into two different places. One group is trying to board a burning ship, and the other group is trying to start something new. If the group that was trying to board a burning ship came to their senses, it would make a hell of a lot easier to start something new that actually represented the actual public. They're not doing that. What I'm trying to do is trying to create a piecemeal solution to this. Meaning if both sides can define where they stand, then maybe they can be in the middle. Meaning if they don't get what they say they're going to get, and if they lose the argument that this kind of DEM-ENTER thing, that they have a spine, that they grow a vagina, that they grow a set of balls, whatever you want to call it, and they walk. And be real about it. And be real about it. Otherwise, all of this is just words and bluster. All this is word and bluster. The Democrats don't need to change. They just have to make sure to never run unless there's a pedophile on the other side. That's a strategy. It's like the winning strategy is just continuously find pedophiles in order to run against. Yeah. Yeah. That's funny. Oh, here we go. Bob Ramirez. In 2020, Bernie will be like FDR and Professor Xavier in a wheelchair with a blanket across his legs. Oh, that's I want to say racist, but is that really racist? It's like ageist or something like that. Bernie is a vigorous, yeah, he's a vigorous man. He'll be all right. He'll be all right. He'll be perfectly okay. Nicholas Lockhires. If DNC falls below 14% of the electorate, they would not be able to attend their own debate. Rules will have to be revised. Oh, that's embarrassing. That's embarrassing. It's like you can't even meet your own standards to show up at your debate. Sad. Sad. Unfortunately, the public has been indoctrinated to believe that there are only two parties. Democratic Socialists of America has started doing really well. I don't know what PIP is doing. I don't know what Bronner's group is doing. I don't know if those people are going to have anybody to run in 2018. So it's look, my hope was that this would be somewhat of an interregnum where there's this kind of vying for power in the Democratic Party. I think 2020 would be that way. I don't know how many groups are prepared to take advantage of 2018. I swear, I hope there are many. Put it that way. I hope there are a lot. I still say, if Sanders won in 2020, meaning if he won the primary and he won the presidency, it would fundamentally change what it means to be a Democrat in the United States. The question becomes, is that enough? Is that enough? Like, to radically change what it means to be a Democrat. That party, I don't know if that party would ever get to the point of going beyond the FDR thing. And I have to be honest, if it's going to solve any solutions or solve any problems, it has to go beyond FDR. None of this save capitalism shit. You need to go beyond FDR. You need to come up with new solutions. Stop looking back at old stuff. That's kind of besides the point. That's besides the point. That's off the rails. That's off the rails. I just hope that there's something there in place to take advantage of the 2018-2020 thing. What I don't think will help in this is if these guys were going through all of this Unity Reform Commission stuff, it gets to the end of the process, they don't get what they want, and they're still DEM-ENTER forever. Still DEM-ENTER forever. Yeah, my connection is weak. I'm sorry, guys. In fact, I may kill this. It's blinking in and out like over and over again, so it looks like this might be getting worse. Yeah, guys, I wanted to talk about this. I saw this and it annoyed me. Here we are. Yeah, I agree, dude. Nicholas Lockmeyers, I've said this myself. Only way forward for progressives would be through a united progressive coalition of many different parties that come together. People's Summit as a start. Agreed. Agreed. I've made this point that Greens, PIPs, DSAs, all of these lefty groups, Socialist Alternative, all these, they need to work in tandem. When the union is talking about getting another party, they need to work in tandem. My connection, man. Come on. Yeah, this connection is annoying. We pay way too much for internet coverage. Where do you fuck up this much? Yeah. Alright. My connection is getting extraordinarily flaky. Yeah, my connection is getting flaky. I'm going to end it on this. Yeah, I agree with you, man. All those groups need to join hands and have a kumbaya. They need to get with the unions. And I would even say they need to talk to Sanders behind the scenes. Behind the scenes. But I would say, though, they need to be working in tandem. They need to work in tandem. And by the way, organize. Like, not just from a political standpoint, but all of these workers all throughout the United States are, I mean, all these people are impoverished. Like, you're talking about, like, they're working their way into poverty just based on the wages that these guys get. Organize those people. It doesn't even need to be into a union. You just need organization. You also need to bring up this idea of corruption. You need to get money out of politics because you're not going to have a huge amount of cash. So you need publicly funded elections. There are certain policy positions that you yourself can take that Democrats and Republicans can't dare touch. I would say exploit that. Exploit it. They're corrupt. Call them corrupt. Call them by their names. If you're in a race, if you get the opportunity to race, corrupt, come on, like every other word. So, and by the way, not just that, even this thing of not being able to represent who they say they represent. Democrats are susceptible to attacks on the left. So, it can be done, man. It just doesn't work in tandem. People always say, oh, you can never have a third party. They say that because they want to dissuade this idea of a third party. What I would say, though, is without the idea of a third party, or without the idea that these people will leave the party, your capital goes away. So I will leave it at that. Sorry for the connection, guys. I need to figure out what's going on. Yeah, I'm gonna kill it. Yeah, my connection is flaky, so I'm gonna end this. Alright, guys, if you enjoy the content, feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course you can always support through Patreon. If Nina Turner, in some odd and weird chance gets to see this, like I said, I love me some Nina Turner, so this is not meant as a bad way. It's just the Unity Reform Commission thing is a little annoying. I understand that it has a potential for significance, but right now all of this stuff is just purely up in the air in regards, and you're in a group called Our Revolution, but you're begging Democrats to allow you these provisions. Please rig it. Just if you can rig it by 60%, if you rig it, if we only rig it by 40%, we'll be okay with that. Like, that's not a revolution. That's not a revolution. That's something else. It is a revolution when you get to the point. It is a revolution when you get to the point of being willing to say no. Willing to say no. Right now, it just seems like it doesn't matter what takes place. We're all in. Wait and see. Wait and see. But yeah, wait and see. Wait and see. I don't want to gut this idea of the Unity Reform Commission because I don't necessarily know the value of the Unity Reform Commission. We're not going to know the value until later on. It could have massive significance, or it can have no significance at all. What I will say is the thing that gives it significance is the idea that these people will be willing to walk. So the significance of that commission is purely related to whether those people are going to be willing to walk, and whether you can make them fail if they don't live up to the obligations of that commission. So if it's DEM-ENTER forever, you have no influence. If it's yes, we're willing to walk under X condition, then yeah, you do have influence, because at the very least they know the condition that's being put up. So I will leave it at that. Yeah, you guys have a good one. I need to check this connection, figure out what's going on, and I have a few more that I want to do tonight. So if the connection is flaky, that's probably just going to be put up. Just upload it. All right, guys.